They found it. The Holy Grail of Lost Media. The original Family Guy pilot. Family Guy is like the McDonald's of adult animated television. You know it's not good, and yet sometimes you consume it as a guilty pleasure. While I'll admit a lot of Family Guy is really bad, it continues to be just dumb enough to still be funny and entertaining. I'll admit, Family Guy is a guilty pleasure of mine, and I do think it gets more of a bad rep than it deserves, especially the earlier seasons, which are almost unrecognizable from Family Guy episodes airing today. So why are we talking about Family Guy today? An infamous piece of Family Guy lost media was recently recovered. The actual original pilot episode that was used to sell the show. Before the entire episode was fully recovered, all we had were a couple of clips and a ton of screenshots of what it looked like. The episode closely follows what eventually became the series' first episode, Death as a Shadow, which sees Peter committing welfare fraud after a governmental oversight sees him gaining $150,000 a week. An episode that I honestly think is a first great episode for introducing the characters, the world of Family Guy, and the main style of comedy that it'll be relying on. Cutaway gags. Lots and lots of cutaway gags. Now, if you're a fan of Family Guy, I highly recommend watching the pilot before it's gone for good. As far as I can tell, it's still available on YouTube, but who knows for how long that'll be. Watching the episode back compared to what eventually became the first episode, it's pretty interesting to see what changes were eventually made. First off, the animation is obviously a little more primitive. The budget for the pilot episode was apparently around $50,000, which I'm told is not a lot for animation, so it definitely has this more rough look to it, but I also think that adds to its charm. The biggest differences are probably the look of all the characters. Peter and Meg's glasses frames are much thicker, and much of the family undergoes changes to their color palettes. Lois was originally a blonde with a red shirt compared to the red hair and green shirt that she wears in the actual episode. Her actually being blonde might actually explain why Chris is blonde, since in the actual show he's the only blonde member of the family. Meg has a blue hat and a white shirt compared to the matching pink ensemble she has in the actual show, and Stewie has a purple shirt and green overalls compared to the yellow shirt and red overalls he wears now. Peter and Chris stay mostly the same, with the only differences being that Chris has ripped jeans and no shoes compared to his eventual normal jeans and sneakers look, and Peter wears black pants instead of green. Brian's the only member of the family who stays largely the same from pilot to the actual episode. All the other visual differences are minor in comparison to these major changes. Most of the episode actually flows the same, with most of the differences being lines and jokes just being switched around and given to other characters. One of the bigger changes I noticed was Chris having many more lines and more of a presence overall. At this time, he was also voiced by Seth MacFarlane, and his voice is just so weird in the pilot.
Thou shalt get drunk, yeah!
It's interesting to compare because in the pilot, Chris is definitely more of an established character. Compared to his later appearances, he comes off as more of like the stereotypical high school pothead.
I'm gonna go get wasted.
Okay, look both ways.
In the actual episode, a lot of his lines are given to Meg instead, including giving Peter the idea to go on welfare and offering advice to him throughout the episode. It's kind of jarring to see in comparison. Another big difference I noticed was almost the complete absence of Quagmire, or at least the early design of Quagmire being very different. In the original pilot, Quagmire's lines are given to this guy, who can actually be found in the background of the original episode. So for me, it's safe to say Quagmire wasn't really conceptualized at all as a character yet.
Hey, who wants to play Drink the Beer?
Right here.
You win!
All right, what do I win?
Another beer!
Peter's boss at the toy factory, Mr. Weed, also sounds completely different from how he is voiced in the actual episode.
Peter, it's your job to watch for any toy products that might be harmful to children. Now look sharp.
Peter, I like you, but I need you to be more than just eye candy around here. It's your job to watch for any toys that could be hazardous to children. Now look sharp!
And of course, the pilot had no original theme, as that hadn't been made yet. Outside of that, the pilot plays out just like it does when compared to the actual episode. There are a ton of other minor changes, and I'll try my best to cover them all here. Meg's opening line and Family Guy's first cutaway about, this guy, were not present in the original pilot. Instead, Meg and Chris have more dialogue, with Lois voicing her concerns about Peter going to a stag party long before it's actually revealed. In the pilot, Chris sets up the cutaway of Peter getting drunk off church wine instead of Lois. The cutaways of Peter at the ice cream store and Peter seeing the movie Philadelphia are flipped around for some reason. At the stag party, the porno that Peter brings in the actual episode is a parody of Casablanca, but in the pilot episode, it's a pizza delivery guy. Everyone at the stag party roughly keeps their same design, except the changes to Quagmire that I already mentioned. Lois's line of Crisp only being 13 happens earlier in the pilot instead of the next morning. In the pilot, the news anchor's name was originally Mike instead of how we'd eventually come to know him as Tom Tucker. In the pilot, Lois knows about Peter getting fired, whereas Peter keeps it a secret from her in the original episode. In the pilot, a lot of scenes talking about Peter's welfare check involve Chris instead of Meg. When Peter throws a piece of Michelangelo's statue of David, it flies into the house of, not Quagmire, instead of Mr. Weeds. And probably the biggest story change of all is when Peter tries to give away all his money. In the episode, he does it in the Super Bowl, but in the pilot, it's just out and about in the streets. And that's about it. Obviously, there are a ton of other minor differences, and honestly, it's just worth watching the original for yourself. So what do we learn from all this? Nothing. But honestly, I just really enjoy seeing what goes into the creative decisions for making these shows. Having the actual pilot offers insights into what Fox execs felt needed changed before the show went to air. For every difference I was able to list off, someone somewhere had a discussion about it needing to be changed for one reason or another, and I find that pretty cool. I also find the concept of lost media cool. In a modern world where media is absolutely everywhere now, it's cool to see how certain media can be lost, never to be found again, only to be recovered 30 years later. The original Family Guy pilot was considered gone forever, but thanks to the work of lost media hunters, it has returned to the public eye for all of us to enjoy. I love exploring lost media and what else can be uncovered on the topic. And if you like topics such as lost media or other mysteries surrounding the internet, then consider checking out my channel. I do deep dives into cool internet topics that I find interesting and some other weird stuff I like to do for fun. So if that sounds up your alley, then consider checking it out. All in all though, I just want to say thank you for watching, and it looks like the true Family Guy was the friends we made along the way.